Hi, everyone, and welcome. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing an author, Jami Fairleigh, and her book is Oil and Dust. I'll try and put this up here. Jami edited her book in Fictionary and then went on to publish it with some really great results. And we're going to talk a little bit about what's happened with Barnes and Noble and your book coming out. But first, I just want to read your bio, and then I'm going to go over to you and let you talk about your book. All righty? Great. Okay, so there we go. So Jami Fairleigh is a writer, urban planner, a hobby collector from Washington. She shares her life with a husband, a trio of well-mannered horses, a pair of dubiously behaved parrots, which we must talk about, and one neurotic dog. You can find her and more about her at www.jamifairleigh.com. So Jami, welcome. I'm excited to talk to you about your book. So why don't we just dive right in there and you can tell us what the book is about and what genre it's in.
Thanks so much. So Oil and Dust, I have it in the fantasy genre. It is about a artist who is traveling across kind of post-technology America looking for his birth parents. And this post-technology world, it's post-apocalyptic, but not in the sense of cannibals and fights for resources. It's not grim at all like that. In a lot of ways, I've started calling it a cozy post-apocalyptic fantasy because the world that comes about is not that different than ours. It's just there's no technology, so it's kind of a throwback to olden times.
Nice. And so you can you talk a little about what your motivation for the book was?
Yeah, I went to the Women's March in Seattle in 2016, and that was right after former President Trump was elected. In the Seattle area is fairly progressive, but people were upset and looking for a positive way to kind of voice frustrations. And I'd never done anything like that before. My husband went with me. He was a little worried that it was a women's march and why should a guy go? But on the bus, we met this older gentleman. He must have been almost in his late 80s, who was also there to just voice his support for kind of the movement. He said his wife wasn't well enough to come, and he was there to stand for her as well. And we just talked about what might happen with the world. And then I started thinking, what would it be like if everything did fall apart? Could we still have a nice world afterwards? And the crowd was so welcoming and warm, and there were funny political slogans, there were angry people ranting, but the sense of community that was there as we shuffled along in the streets and everybody smiling and helping each other over curbs, and there wasn't any of the kind of the chaos or the rioting or anything that it could have devolved into. And it really made me start thinking about a world that would be ours but not ours, where we didn't have technology that was ripping us all apart and isolating us, where people helped each other because that's the way you lived, not because they were told you were supposed to be a good person or a good member of an organization.
Right. So I can see that a little bit coming out into the book on how the different communities are and how they're interacting with each other. And I mean, I don't want to give away any of the story, but it's a very tense, suspenseful story that I'm as you know, I'm about not quite, a little under half of the way through, but totally enjoying it. So does this book then lead into Graphite and Turbulence? Is it a series?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so he is searching for his family. It'll be a 4-book series, and along the way, it's also a coming of age book. He's a very, very young 20-year-old man who was really raised in a life of privilege. So what his ideas of what the world are versus what they actually are pretty different, and what he thinks he's looking for and what he's actually looking for are not they're not meshing well, and it kind of confounds him. But the whole series is meant to be 4 books.
Wow, that's quite a project, that, because it's what, how many pages here? Almost 500 pages. So that's, clearly fitting in the fantasy genre
Yeah.
of things. And, there's a nice bit of magic in this book that makes it very interesting to read. And that was kind of I'm not going to say what the magic is, but I hadn't seen it before. And so I found it really interesting to see what you did with it and how it came out, and how the main character, Matthew, is using it. And, it, it really adds that extra little special thing to the story. So you published it. When was this one published?
September of last year.
September of last year. Okay, so tell us your story about your experience with Barnes and Noble.
Sure. Oil and Dust, I put up for pre-order in mid-July, and I got an email from somebody at Barnes and Noble saying that they'd like to add it to they have a feature called Top Indie Picks that runs every 2 months. They have a new set of indies, and it's in all genres. They picked mine as one of, I think 25 of us got picked for fantasy. So it was a top indie pick, September, October.
That's fantastic. So then after the top indie pick, it went on to do something kind of interesting that's a little bit different with serialized fiction. So let's talk about that a bit.
Sure. They reached out in February to confirm that the second book, Graphite and Turbulence, would be coming out on schedule. And when I said that it was, they then offered me the March serial read for Barnes & Noble Nook. So it is a program where they put your book up in pieces where people can read it for free using their app or one of their Nook readers, but you're only delivered a little bit of the story every day. So you, by the end of the month, you have had read the whole thing if you've kept up with it. And then the day the month turns, there's another book. I think Adam Croft has his book up this month now.
Right. I saw that actually. Yeah. Okay. So that means then, so we'll just make sure I understand this correctly. So that means your book goes up, people start reading it, then they get hooked, but they can't quite finish it. So they then go and buy the book.
Either they can't finish it, or I had a number of readers who wrote reviews that they wanted to read ahead. In the way that the serial read works, you can't read ahead. So then they purchase the book and then purchase the second book also in order to consume the story at the rate that they wanted to.
Yeah, so I have to say, from a fictionary point of view, I found this story really interesting because, as you know, because you use Fictionary, it's designed around scene by scene editing, and it's to make every scene great. And with serialized fiction becoming more popular, everybody knows now about Amazon Bella, and the actual quality of a scene is really important, because if you blow one, that's it. The person doesn't have the book, like, I'm not going back to the site, I'm done, right? So I think it's a really interesting thing to motivate writers to really, really work hard at every scene, and then the reader's going to love your book, which it sounds to me is what's happening with yours. So, it's pretty dreamy about your experience, what you're going through, and to get the attention of Barnes and Noble, that's a big deal, right? So talk about a little bit how that felt, and is it influencing how you're moving forward?
It was a pretty big honor. It wasn't something I expected. Just getting picked the first time felt amazing. And then to have them reach out a second time and kind of push the book even further was, just bananas. But the rate that the book picked up, not only releasing the second book in the series, but also having the serial read at the same time, was pretty astounding. I saw increases on all the platforms, Amazon, Kobo, everything except for Google. The book started moving on all of them. And I don't know how much of that was, people, I think a lot of readers read across multiple platforms. I don't think they're as platform specific as a lot of people think. So I've made a commitment to have all my stuff out as wide as I can get it. And it really helped this time.
Nice. That's really fantastic. All right. So let's talk a little bit about editing and storyteller and your experience there.
I didn't find out about it until I had gone through 4 drafts of Oil and Dust. It had been through a developmental edit already, and my editor had taken a crack at it. And then I found it, and I had to let my editor know that it was going to take me quite a while to get
Right.
them back anything because I decided to go back through the book completely. And it took a while. I mean, it's if you use all of the story elements, you're being very thoughtful about so many things. It's a lot to hold at one time. I do scene by scene, and I fill out the entire thing scene by scene. I haven't tried going through and just doing a couple of the elements with each pass. That's something I might try in the future. Although I was told if you've started building a series one way, make sure you finish the series using the same process, and then you try something new with the
Yeah.
next book or the next
Yeah.
series.
Yeah.
But it was so much easier to remember. It's almost like a checklist that
Mm.
you think,
Yeah.
oh, have I brought in an element of this? And you can read your scene really quickly and be like, oh, right here is where it should go in. Prior to Storyteller, I had read Sean Coyne's
Very good.
Story Grid,
Mhm.
which I made so much sense to me. I really liked his analytical way of going about thinking about editing. But then when you sit down with your book and you try to build that huge spreadsheet that he talks about, it was so overwhelming for a new writer that I I ended up closing my book and not working on it for about a year. It just kind of
Oh,
overwhelmed me and freaked me out so much.
yeah.
So this was a very I thought easy to use tool.
Yeah. Thank
There's a
you.
couple components that are so useful. I love that it gives you a whole list of all of your characters. So
Yeah.
you can I caught even that I had referred to the same person in 2 different ways, and it wasn't a nickname. It was like I was typing their name one way in parts of
Yeah.
the book and a different way in other parts,
Yep.
and it caught all of that, and that was really useful. So when
Yeah.
it was time to do Graphite and Turbulence, it was I think I did a read through of that initial first draft, kind of fixed some of the grammar things, thought about story structure at that level, and then I started right in to Storyteller with the second book before I gave it to betas.
Nice. So, the thing with writing a series is you're going to have a story arc for each book.
Mm-hmm.
And last year I edited for a gentleman 4 books for his series. And when we did book 4, we took the story arcs in Fictionary and we looked at, okay, what's the inciting incident of book 1? What's the climax of book 4? Are they mirrored? Okay, good. And you can pull out like just the inciting incidents of the books. You can you can look at, does the whole sort of series arc, even though it doesn't draw the arc for the series, that's a dream of mine for the future. But for now, at least you can look at the different ones and you can go back and find your inciting incidents really quickly and then compare them through. And you can look in between book 3. So you look at, okay, well, the climax of book 2 is really the midpoint of the series. Is hitting that? And so it gives you a way to actually look at the whole series, which is that's the first series I've really done with somebody else working on it. And I found it really interesting to analyze in that whole big. It's got to work the whole thing, right? So, and I predict you're going to have people reading your whole series because your first book is so good that it'll keep people engaged, and so then you got to worry about these things.
Yeah, that's the hope. At least with a series like this, where it's the 4 books make one complete story versus, an episodic book where you could come in to the series at any point. And...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so very interesting. Okay, and what was like, if you look back at Storyteller, what's the biggest change it caused you to make in your story?
It's almost like a step by step. It'll lead you through the things that you should consider. I like that you don't have to. There's nothing in Storyteller that doesn't let you progress if you decide that you don't want to include an element, or you are fine with, 3 chapters or 3 scenes in a row ending the same way. It's not going to tell you you can't do that. So it's really flexible, and it allows you to think about what you might want to consider. If you do, it's also really easy to flip back and forth between chapters to see, what did I just do in that one, and am I being repetitive in my story structure or my scene structure even,
Right.
which is
Right.
really useful.
So, okay, then with your process, so you told us the beginning part, you edited your book in StoryTeller, you exported it, and then what happened?
Then it goes to beta readers. With the first book, Oil and Dust, based on beta reader feedback, I did rip out a couple of chapters and rewrite the beginning. And there's some other things that they found was perhaps not keeping their attention the way that I intended it to. So I did a fairly big revision again, and then just kind of ran through it with StoryTeller one more time to make sure I hadn't moved too many things around.
Right.
The second book, though, they didn't think anything like that was necessary.
Good.
So I think I had internalized a lot of what I'd learned the first time around. There was a few things. I'm writing a male protagonist, and so all of my beta readers are male, and I had them specifically reading to make sure that there wasn't anything I was putting in there that they're like, well, I don't know, 20-year-old guy, maybe not, this one thing.
Yeah.
And then another beta reader also had a insight into something that happens in the second book that was really useful. But yeah, I think that going through the process the first time with Oil and Dust, and then again with Graphite and Turbulence, it gave me the structure that I was looking for to know what I needed to do next. And it's pretty exciting to be able to check off the chapters as you go and get closer and closer to the end. And then after beta readers, especially for the second book, there wasn't a ton that I needed to do. Then I went to my editor for their feedback, then a line editor, and then the proofreader.
Good for you. That's fantastic. And then off you went. Nice. Now, can you share with us what the third book is about?
Charcoal and Smoke.
Okay.
The journey continues.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And is Charcoal still there?
Of course. Yeah.
Very important character in the book. I won't say who it is, but very important. So
he's a lot of people's favorite character.
I bet. So just on the Fictionary thing, one of the things we focus on in Fictionary on a scene-by-scene basis is the entry and exit hooks. So I just want to read the first few sentences of Oil and Dust, if you don't mind, to talk about what an amazing entry hook is. So this is chapter 1. I wish I'd been born 200 years ago, before technology died, before the world died. And there I just want to go, dun, 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 dun. Like it's such a good entry hook of who is I? What is that person doing? What happened to the world? I read that and thought, wow, now there's an entry hook. Yep. And I can see all the way through that you've used entry and exit hooks from your scenes, because of course I look up. I can't help myself, but I can see it's really, and I love to see that because it really, I do believe it keeps the pacing up and it keeps a reader engaged in the book. And so it's kind of exciting for me when I read a book that's been edited within Fictionary and I can see some of the little influences in there. So are you writing your third book already?
Yeah, I'm almost done with it.
Fantastic.
I'm about the 80% mark now.
Nice. And do you have a time frame for when you want the fourth one done?
No. So one of the things that Barnes and Noble did ask is if I would put up the third book pre-order before the end of the month so that they could push that when they push the second book also. And I hadn't planned on putting that pre-order up until they made that little push, but I couldn't turn down the opportunity. So I picked next March, 3/23/23. It's a palindrome. Kind of made me happy.
Yeah.
But because the drafting is going really well, I actually think that I'm going to keep drafting all the way through book 4, so that while I'm editing book 3, I will be able to, layer in a few of those things that are happening in book 4, like foreshadow it.
Yep.
Since 4 wraps up the whole thing, I want to make sure I'm being very thoughtful about how all those threads are being tied.
Super exciting. Like it just, clearly Barnes and Noble has seen something in your book that they're thrilled about promoting. So, kind of an author's dream. So my next question, of course, is tell people where they can find you and your books, but clearly they can find your books everywhere, but share your information anyway.
My website is jamifairleigh.com, and that's Fairleigh. You can also Google oil and dust, and the SEO is pretty good. It brings people back to the page pretty easily. Yeah. But yeah, I think you should read the acknowledgements, because I put a little shout out back there to you guys for.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
I got that for you. Where are the acknowledgements there's author's notes. Oh, there's about the author. Nice photo. Really? Well, okay. Yay. I'm going to have to find that and highlight it. That's very exciting. Thank you. I haven't got that for you. I was just excited about reading the book. Jami, it's really been nice talking to you. Everybody who's watching this, buy Jami's book. And also leave a review, because reviews are really helpful to writers. I just want to say I get nothing for promoting this book. I'm doing it because I love to promote books and I want to support authors. And I truly have enjoyed what I've read so far here, and I'm looking forward to reading the rest. So let's all just support Jami and buy her book.
Thanks so much for the opportunity and for the great software. As a new writer, it was invaluable.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for saying that. That's a happy note to end on.